in the previous video, we saw something unusual when we combined the 3.5-inch hard drives with the small 2.5-inch hard drives, and it was the bottom hard drive was the 3.5-inch and the top one was the 2.5-inch, and it was set up as a RAID 1 array. And here's actually what the results of it. So we see that this is actually the big hard drive. This is the small laptop hard drive, and this is when they were combined for a RAID 1 array. And we noticed that the LEDs were not blinking together during the reads. So when a RAID 1 array does a read, it's supposed to combine both of the hard drives and double the performance. And we saw that it actually was not doing what it was supposed to do, because you see 149 here, 134 here, and 153 here. What it should have done, it should have combined the two and at least gotten at least 200 or 250 here when you combine them in RAID 1, but it did not. So I thought it was a little weird. On one hand, we did have an unusual configuration where it was two different hard drives of different sizes and different manufacturers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a fair test here, and I'm going to make it two identical hard drives. It's actually this hard drive, and there's two identical hard drives, and I move the switches around. So I set it up as the RAID 0. So if you look in the Windows Manager, you're going to see 4 terabytes unallocated. So the first thing you need to do is initialize. You're going to have to do GPT because MBR will max out at 2 terabytes and we're going to need 4 terabytes. So I'm going to select GPT here, hit OK. Next thing I need to do is allocate it, and I'm going to do an exFAT test here because I'm going to be using it in exFAT because I need the Mac Windows compatibility. But if you're only going to use it with Windows, you can choose NTFS, but here I'm going to do exFAT for cross compatibility. And as I'm formatting it, you can see that the LEDs were blinking, and now we have our 4 terabytes to use in Windows. So if you open it up here, you can actually see that I've got the 4 terabytes here to use in Windows, but I won't be really opening it up. I'm going to be using Crystal Disk to benchmark it, which is what I've been using, and here it is right here. So I'm running the benchmark, and you see that the hard drives are in use. So I'm going to put this down here. So as it's benchmarking, let's look at the performance again. So like I said, this was the one 3.5-inch hard drives, and now that we have 2 of them in RAID 0, you would expect this performance to be doubled here. And I'm going to fast forward through this just because this is going to take a while. Alright, so it looks like we got our first result, and it looks like we're finally getting numbers that make sense. We're seeing 264, which is a lot better. A lot better than the 153 we saw up there. Probably because it was probably something to do with the fact that this hard drive is a different size and a different manufacturer, and it's also a different type of hard drive. This is actually a hybrid hard drive, which means that has a little bit of SSD flash combined with the hard drive. So I'm thinking it didn't work well to combine the big hard drive with the small hard drive, and it looks like we're getting a lot better performance when you combine 2 hard drives that are the same. because as expected we're getting about twice the performance because we've got a RAID 0 array. Now I'm going to let this test run through. This is the RAID 0 performance test. I will note that I will be doing a RAID 1 performance test right after this, so we can get an idea of if there's any difference between RAID 0 and RAID 1. And the final test I'll be doing later will be testing the RAID 1 array over a network connection. So I actually have a router that I'm going to be connecting to the hard drive over Wi-Fi and also Ethernet, and I'm going to see if see the type of performance you get over a network. And I'll be doing those tests with RAID 1 when I test this over the network, just because most people, when they set up a network hard drive, they would rather have a RAID 1 array over a RAID 0 array, just because it's a lot more secure in case one of the hard drive crashes. Alright, so it looks like we're seeing something, not something we'd like to see. We're seeing that we're only getting about 80 megabytes of write, sequential writes, which is not good because, you know, we got 83 up here. You would expect to get at least around 160, but it looks like it's actually gotten worse. So what this tells me is that there's some sort of issue with the probably the RAID software in here is not perfectly optimized. But we do see that on these deep quays, it looks like we're getting much better performance here. So it looks like we were able to take these two over here and double the performance and make them there, but the sequential writes were not benefited. However, the sequential reads were improved. So something's wrong with the RAID software. It looks like it's striping the reads correctly, but it's not striping the writes correctly. It looks like it's actually just maybe even just mirroring the writes instead of striping the writes, because the performance of the writes went down in RAID 0. And that's the only conclusion I can make. These are the only hard drives I have. Maybe if you had a NAS hard drive like the reds or the blacks or the golds, they might have a little bit different performance, but right now all I have in here is the WD green hard drives, and this is what you get.